Welcome to the PD Pet Care Vlogs. I'm Dr. Cath Watson, and today we're going to talk about Toxoplasmosis in cats. So Toxoplasmosis is a single-celled parasite. It actually infects all warm-blooded mammals, but cats are special because they're actually essential to the life cycle of the parasite. This parasite has a pretty complex life cycle. So the reason cats are special is because in cats, when they ingest the Toxoplasmosis parasite, the parasite can then reproduce. So it can form eggs, which are then shed in the cat's feces for about 10 to 14 days after the cat's been infected. So those feces end up in the environment where those eggs are actually really hardy. They're actually not infective for the first sort of 24 to 48 hours, but after that they can then infect any other warm-blooded mammal that happens to ingest them. So for ruminants, so sheep, cattle and so on, they tend to actually ingest the eggs directly from the environment. Same with rats and mice and so on, particularly through soil, contaminated food, that sort of thing. For other warm-blooded mammals, so things like humans and other predators, so things like dogs, it's usually because they've then eaten one of those, what we'd call intermediate hosts, be it a rat, a mouse, a sheep, a cattle, a pig, anything like that. So there are intermediate hosts, but obviously there's different types of intermediate hosts there. What happens in the intermediate host, rather than the parasite being able to produce eggs, what it does is clone itself and then produces these cysts in various tissues throughout the body. And when those tissues are then consumed either by a cat, in which case the life cycle continues, or by potentially another intermediate host like humans or dogs, then obviously it can then form further cysts. In cats, we don't tend to see any actual clinical signs from toxoplasmosis, so they don't tend to end up sick as a result of ingesting it unless they've got some form of immunosuppression going on, so whether that's medications that they're on or some viral disease like FIV, FELV, those sort of conditions. In humans, in a lot of cases there may be no symptoms as well, but the high risk for humans is if we're talking about pregnant females, and it's not so much that the mum-to-be will actually get sick, but that those parasites or cysts will end up inside the infant in the womb, and then those babies are born with potential problems from the toxoplasmosis, and they may not be immediately apparent. But because those cysts can form in delicate tissues like the eyes, like the nervous system, like the heart, like the lungs, then we can see secondary effects as a result of those cysts. It's also a problem for immunocompromised people for the same reason. Those cysts can end up in places that can end up causing all sorts of problems. Interestingly, for some of the other mammals that toxoplasmosis will affect, so things like rats and mice, it can actually change their behaviour, and what it seems to do is reduce their fear of the smell of cats, which obviously makes them much more likely to be out and about when there's cats around, which makes them much more likely to be eaten. So this is one smart parasite that's a single cell, not much to it, but it's managing to change the behaviour of the prey species of its essentially definitive host, the host it needs to be able to reproduce itself in. So kind of scary, but kind of impressive at the same time. We've all heard about the Maui dolphins. Obviously they're warm-blooded mammals. In fact, so are seals, sea lions, other dolphins, whales and so on. They can all end up infected with toxoplasmosis as well. And the big issue there is that it affects reproduction in particular, but can also affect things like eyesight, which is going to compromise their survival out in the wild as well. So real problem though when you're talking fertility rates for a species like the Maori dolphin who don't exactly reproduce frequently anyway, and have a very small population, so hence the reason it's a big problem for them. It's also a problem for our livestock, and from an agricultural perspective for New Zealand. Toxoplasmosis can cause abortion in sheep, so again fertility issues, also in goats and pigs, and this ends up reducing lambing percentages, survival of lambs, causing stillbirths, which is not really good for the farmers, but also not good for those sheep. So in terms of what can we do to help minimise the effect of toxoplasmosis, because those eggs that are produced and spread in the cat faeces end up in the environment, and they can last in the environment for over a year, so they're pretty hardy. Once they're out there, there's not really a whole lot we can do. For sheep, there's vaccines to try and prevent the abortion issues. But what can we do with our cats that are going to help minimise the risk? You're not likely to catch toxoplasmosis just from patting a cat, or if they lick you, or if they bite you, or they scratch you. That's not really a way that you're likely to be affected by toxoplasmosis. You could be from handling cat faeces, but if the cat faeces are really fresh, then the risk is very, very low, because it usually takes at least 24 hours before those eggs are actually infective to us as humans. So if you're going to pick up cat faeces, make sure you do it while they're fresh, wear gloves, wash your hands afterwards. That's the big thing. The biggest risk to us actually is cats pooing in our vegetable gardens, because you're not necessarily going to know that it's there. That soil ends up contaminated. If you're out there gardening and you're doing it without gloves, or you don't wash your hands afterwards, obviously there's a risk with that. But also with fresh vegetables out of the garden, if you're not washing them first, then again there's a risk you're going to end up picking up toxoplasmosis from the soil or from the vegetables. The other risk obviously is in lifestyle feeds, so grain stores, that sort of thing, obviously attractive to rodents. Where rodents are, you've probably got cats following, which means you can have cat faeces around those storage areas for feeding for livestock. So limiting cats from livestock feed areas, trying to prevent them pooing in vegetable gardens, or any gardens realistically that you're likely to be spending a bit of time in. Picking up cat faeces when they're fresh, so providing litter trays. So another thing is not feeding raw meat to your cats, because obviously if you're feeding raw sheep, cattle, pig, goat, any of those, you're quite possibly passing on those cysts that are not going to be visible to the naked eye, but are going to end up in the cat and creating more eggs out into the environment. So on that note, preventing your cat hunting, while a lot of people think it's a good thing to have a cat out there who's hunting all the mice and rats in the environment, just be aware that could well actually be spreading toxoplasmosis further as well. So there's quite a big argument there for keeping cats contained, not only for their safety, although toxoplasmosis doesn't tend to make them sick. There's a whole bunch of other reasons to keep your cats contained for their own safety, but actually for the safety of everybody when it comes to toxoplasmosis, and also obviously for our wildlife.